It is the final word, Border Gavaskar Daily. Adam Collins, Geoff Lemon, Stumps Day 2 at Sydney. What a day it was. cbussuper.com.au. Sort your super out in 2025. Click the link in the show notes. Get it done. Make it your New Year's resolution. Geoff, tell us about that day in 30 seconds.
That's 2 seconds per wicket. 15 wickets fell today, 9 of them Australian, 6 of them Indian, and Bumrah wasn't there for most of it, got Labuschagne out, and then was off the field, off to hospital with a back strain. Siraj and Prasidh Krishna suddenly crashed through 3 of them, and then it was a bit of a rebuild, and then more crashing through. Webster made a 50, but Australia ended up getting bowled out short. Nitish Kumar Reddy took a couple. They were 181. India made 185, 4-run deficit, and then India 6 for bugger all by the close. They were 145 ahead. Rishabh Pant made 60 off about 20 balls and then got out, and Scott Boland took 4 for. Bloody hell, you can't do it. You can't 30-second summary of that.
I'll have a crack at filling in some of the gaps. So the lead's 145 at the close after Punt made 61 from 33, India's second quickest 50 in Test history.
The quickest was also him.
Quickest was also him.
Yep.
Reddy did pick up 2 wickets. Krishna picked up 3 and filled in commendably for Jasprit Bumrah, who went off the field just after lunch, not to return. He's gone for scans. More on that later. All out 181. Top scoring was Bo Webster on debut, making 57 from 105 balls, joint with Smith for a 57-run stand. Smith was out for 33 on the stroke of lunch, 5 runs away from 10,000 in Test cricket. After lunch, bowled out Australia. Siraj finished it off. He picked up 3 as well, including 2 in an over, way back in that dramatic first hour of play, where Bumrah nicks off Labuschagne. Siraj's turn to step up, I reckon, a little bit like Melbourne's second innings last week, where it's like, right, you have to be doing it at both ends.
Yep.
You can't be relying on one end. You've got to be taking it on from both ends.
Yep.
And Siraj, in 1 over, picks up Sam Constas, who in the previous over against Bumrah went the reverse scoop.
Yep.
His trademark shot, if you will.
And early trademark.
Offered his stumps to Bumrah at one point, then ultimately decided to try and play 2 shots off Siraj, trying to smack the cover off it through cover. Played and missed at the first outswinger, nicked the second outswinger, UGLY, you ain't got no alibi. And then the 3 balls later, Travis Head nicked an absolute beauty. So Constas did essentially expose Head at that point, coming in way too early. I think there's an argument for Head not coming in early, by the way. I reckon there might be an argument for using a more dynamic batting lineup now. They've got what feels like the warm old coat and pair of jeans that the big slug is. He couldn't have had it any better, I don't think.
No?
He makes 57. He's out to a ball that balloons or trampolines off the surface well after the lunch break, where by that point he's already raised 50 to felt like 150.
It was vibes. It was totally vibes. So there's the point where you know the 3 wickets go quickly. I thought Siraj was really good. He was getting swing. He was getting significant swing. He was pitching it up. He was getting the ball to seam after it pitched, and that's after that tiny little tickle from Labuschagne. But there was something about, so they lose the 3 quickly. They end up at that point where Webster's out there batting with Smith, but for what ended up being quite a long time, and then with Carey for what felt like quite a long time. And both of those partnerships felt like the ones where Australia was going to go on. They were going to grind away. India would have had their flurry, a bit like what happened in Melbourne, where it's like, oh, they've almost got it. It's like the bar of soap in the shower. Nearly got it, nearly got it, nearly got it, don't got it. Oh, it's fired off and ended up bouncing off the wall, and you're not quite sure where it's gone. That has been the way, and it's been Australia's tail and Australia's lower order as well with Carey, and the bowlers have been able to make sure that India can't take advantage of those moments. And then they did. And then they sort of did in slow motion. I mean, in the end, there was still a point where they could have bowled out Australia 50 or 60 short, and that didn't happen in the end. Australia do get up to parity with a few runs from the last pair partnership from Lyon and Boland. But that bit where Webster's going along with Smith, who looked quite comfortable and confident out there, and he's got such a stonking first innings record that, you thought, well, if India get through Smith, he's got, the 4th most runs ever against India. He's got the most hundreds ever against India. And he makes all his runs in the first innings. There is an awful lot riding on India getting Steve Smith out in the first innings here, because he's not going to do anything against him in the second innings going by his record. Although this will be much earlier in the match than Smith would traditionally be batting in the 4th innings.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It was 4 for 39 when Head falls, and it feels like it's going to be another one of those days. And I guess it was ultimately, but the way in which they were able to consolidate, a bit more on Webster in a sec, but just with Smith especially, it wasn't all grinding either. There was an emphatic pull shot that he smacked into the O'Reilly stand, followed by this lavish Caribbean style,
cover drive,
cover drive with a million miles with his from the ball when he made contact in terms of his feet.
Well, he always looks dramatic when he cover drives because he has to turn the whole thing inside out.
True.
He's got to. It's like when you're trying to do the doona cover and you've got your arms right in there and then you got to whip the whole thing out and then or do you try to climb inside the doona cover? Sometimes Steve Smith looks like he is batting inside a doona cover. He's got to have those elastic sort of wrists to twist around and come inside out at the ball and then lash it. So it was dramatic when he did it.
I remember writing about Smith really early on when in doing this, described him as like a goofy foot snowboarder. Like it's the wrong way around with his hands to play the ball through cover. And yeah, you're right. Sometimes it requires not moving his feet to get his thrust in the right direction when he makes contact. The transfer of weight, as the pros often call it.
What was snowboarding? There was like a PlayStation, like an equivalent to Tony Hawk Pro Skater that was a snowboarding one. What was it called?
Was it Tora? What was the Australian? I think there was Jack
Tora Bright.
Tora Bright.
No, it would have been pre-Tora Bright's era, I reckon. I don't know. Can't remember.
I don't know. It's not my
too many experiments with a pure milk bottle beforehand.
I know that the Tony Hawk one had Body Jar on the soundtrack, which is as a 16-year-old boy. That's pretty cool.
That was
pretty cool.
Flying the Flag. That was Australia. That was like when Tom Cruise said Melbourne, Australia in Rain Man. We were like, we got to mention.
I feel like saying Body Jar. I must mention Dono as well, who has seen Body Jar like 100 times. Anyway, but yeah, like that partnership with Carey only lasted 10 overs, but I agree with you. Because Bumrah wasn't there. Carey arrives pretty much when Bumrah leaves the field for the first time. We just assumed it was to go for a little massage or whatever before lunch, but comes back and bowls 1 over of medium fast after lunch, straight back up the race. And by the time
of Harold Larwood's.
Yeah, by the time he gets into the car, he looks like he's going off to the farm.
Yeah.
Looks like he's going off in the proverbial body bag. From this test series, the body jar bag. But he does come back and bound up the stairs late in the day, so maybe he is fine, and we'll get that dramatic return of Bumrah at some stage in the fourth innings of this test match. We'll get some steer, I guess, when he bats tomorrow. But yeah, we haven't even touched on the what happened later in the day. But yeah, just to sort of sum that up, I really admired the way that India held on tight, the way that in the absence of Bumrah, Kohli leading the team. Rohit Sharma did an interview on Star at lunch where he went into detail about how he left himself out on form. It sounded quite honourable and noble the way he framed it. But that meant that it was Kohli calling the shots and it was Kohli ringing the changes.
Oof.
And if this is...
That's going to go down well in some corners of the internet. Kohli back as captain.
I know, right? I mean, yeah, I can already tell. I mean, I whisper it. I don't read the YouTube comments anyway, but I'm sure there'll be lots of commentary around Rohit and Kohli as there tends to be on these matters. But yeah, the way in which Kohli was able to just get it right. Midas touch stuff with Reddy, golden arm stuff to an extent. He's taken some important wickets in the series, not least Labuschagne at Adelaide when he looks set. Gets 2 in a hurry. Cummins and then Stark in the space of a couple of overs.
Yeah.
Before that...
Which matters, because Cummins has been such an annoyance.
Totally.
Both innings in Melbourne. Like that... Australia don't win the test in Melbourne if not for either of Cummins' innings with the bat.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. And Pradesh Krishna, who's had to wait his turn, he took 10 wickets for India A in the unofficial test matches before the series, and we all thought, in form plus tall bowler plus Perth equals first 11.
Got to be good if you're tall. Like, look at Josh Hull. Tall bowlers, always good.
Well, he was a tall bowler in form who'd played Test cricket and can hit 140. We thought, well, this is the guy who's most likely to play at Perth and try and rough Australia up a little bit along with Bumrah. Didn't get picked. Harshit Rana got the final spot. And at the time it worked, right? That was a perfectly acceptable selection at the time. But it does mean that he's been out the back in the nets a lot and he's been champing at the bit. And today was his chance. And when Bumrah went down, he embraced it. The way he set up Carey, the previous ball went through the gate and just missed the off stump going over the top. Exactly the same way that Carey was out in the second innings to Bumrah last week.
Been a few times now, hasn't it?
Yeah,
Carey, the ball coming
Anderson
in.
at Birmingham, I remember, around the wicket as well.
Right arm around the wicket. Is he just honouring the tradition of Australian wicket keepers in the vein of Adam Gilchrist? Just can't play the ball around the wicket when the right arm is coming around.
Well, it feels to me like he just trusts his cover drive, and why wouldn't you? He played 3 lovely cover drives today, 4 boundaries. It was a sprightly innings until it wasn't. But yeah, Pradesh, the next ball through the gate, knocks him over, bends back the middle stump, exposes the lower order, and they don't contribute that many. From the point where Carey's dismissed, they only get another 40 or so runs, and that's the end of that. So for all of the drama, for the fight back, for the Webster innings, which I'll get you to comment on now, they still fall 4 runs short of parity.
Yep.
It sort of was a really weird day in terms of the push and pull and no team taking the bull by the horns when they had the chance, especially Australia.
Yeah, well, the Webster thing is the key piece in that, and that's the interesting part. You know, if Mitchell Marshall's there out of nick and doesn't make any, you know, what happens then?
Yeah.
You know, does that Australian innings fall away to a match losing deficit where they're 70 or 80 behind, something like that? So Webster was able to keep his cool. Just, you know, played relatively conventionally, I thought, which is odd when you're 6'11" and all the rest of it. Conversation with a colleague I was having today that he is perplexing in that he looks both really young and really old at the same time. He sort of looks, he's kind of babyish, but also, I mean, I know he's 31, but I don't know, he's a kind of mix of a couple of different human beings jammed together. Maybe he's like the bottom half of one and the top half of another. I'm not sure. Like I'm trying to work out how to process the visual of him playing cricket, because it's different. You know, Cameron Green batting, obviously you don't normally see really, really tall batters being really good at it, right? That's not something we're used to. Generally, really tall players are number 11s and swinging the bat around. Cameron Green's got that kind of Terminator. He's such a big block of a human being, and Webster's a bit more slinky. He's more like the Stuart Broad sort of car wash dancer kind of guy. He's going in all sorts of directions at once. But you know, he was calm. He was controlled. And yeah, they'd be in a lot more trouble than they are without him, because right now, you know, Australia I don't know, it's hard to know where it is, I suppose. Not many wickets in hand, but we'll come to the Indian innings in a tick. Yeah,
we will. Just to close off on Webster here, like, he just looks like he knows what he's doing. You know, that's the advantage of coming later to Test cricket at your first bite of it. If you get a chance in your early 20s and you're still trying to work out who you are as a player, it can leave you looking a little bit exposed. He never looked exposed at any point today. He'll have his ups and downs like anybody does, but what a great first impression to make. He looks super organised, and look, I think we might have read this stat out when Tom Decent was on the show the other day. If we didn't, it was one of Tommy's. Alex Doolan made his Test debut the same week that Beau Webster made his state debut, and I only use that because Doolan's the last Tasmanian to play Test cricket. So, you know, when you've been playing professional cricket for a decade, and for much of that he wasn't looking like ever being an international cricketer, it does get you to a stage when you just know the type of player you are, and he didn't need to revert too far from that, despite the fact that the pitch throughout was proving difficult, and maybe his extra height helped with that. So many players have been hit on the thigh pad, on the box, on the arm, on the head, and he managed to avoid all of those blows on the way through to 57. Yeah,
and we might come back to him in the Hall of Fame, I suppose. The Indian innings then, well, I mean, it starts off with a flourish. Bloody hell, Jaiswal, 4 boundaries in 5 balls off Mitchell Starc.
Incredible.
16 for none at the end of the first over. And it didn't look like a deliberate thing of, I'm going to try to smash every ball. He got a wide one and he went after it and carved it away, and then continued to get width and continued carving those. And then he took on balls that were there to hit. You know, it didn't feel like he was trying to manufacture that aggression, but he was confident enough to take it on when the opportunity was there.
Yeah, it was a bit like how it was in Perth all those weeks ago. It feels like a couple of minutes in one sense, but feels like so long with the cricket that's played out since, and the way that he was able to take on the new ball. And, you know, he's Starc still carrying something like, to the naked eye, he certainly bowled quickly and bowled well on day one. Picked up 3 wickets only yesterday, but concedes 36 runs in 4 overs today. Different kind of story. I spoke to Scott Boland before play on radio, and he freely acknowledged to me just how difficult it was for him to back up after Melbourne, saying he could barely walk the day after the 5th day there, and remembering it was only a 3-day turnaround. So I raised that because the consecutive days thing, when Starc had to go for scans 2 days before the Test match, like, this was always a degree of risk if they had to A, bowl first, and B, bowl 2 days on the trot.
Yeah, bowl quickly, which they wouldn't have envisaged being in the 3rd innings, but here they are. But Boland, bloody hell, could he walk today? Could he run in, hitting the deck, jagging the hell out of it, bowls both openers, KL Rahul and then Jaiswal, with a couple of ridiculous deliveries. The lateral movement he's getting off this pitch is borderline unplayable. Yeah,
this pitch is giving plenty to seamers, but especially to those who are super accurate and subtle in their movement. And some of these balls are moving prodigiously from Boland, but the delivery to Jaiswal will be up there, right up there with the very, very best of his 54 Test wickets. I mean, that is angled in, jagged away, hit the top of off to the bloke who was on 22 at that stage, scoring the majority of the boundaries and looking $1 million. It was going to take something special to cut him off. He looked like he was in one of those moods like we saw at Melbourne and we saw at Perth, and there was Boland, the other end of his career, 36 years of age, getting it spot on, getting it so precise. So Boland's never going to be express pace. He's never going to move the ball the way that Bumrah moves the ball, but he's just a little bit of every category all at the same time. And what's more, he does it at the start of spells, Geoff. The ball to go through KL Rahul's gate, again, perfect spot, inside edge onto leg stump. That was his 9th ball. The ball to get rid of Jaiswal, his 11th ball, using your numbers from yesterday. 28 of his 54 wickets have come in the first 2 overs of a spell. I mean, this is not correlation. Like, this is a reason for this, right? He the same applies to why Boland's able to come into the team, having been on the sidelines for ages, and make an impact right away. He's got his, above the shoulders, he's got it right. He knows that when the chance comes in a game or in an innings, he's got to be right on it straight away. He's hardwired that way, and that's paying enormous dividends.
Gill, who came in for Rowett, hasn't really paid off. He's out relatively cheaply, and then Coley fishing again, and this time he was really pissed off with himself. He was sort of playing that little punch away from the back of a length ball, and looked and had ticked over a few singles doing that, and then he gets the wider one, not that much wider, but moving away a bit, and reaches for it again, and he punched his thigh and he swished the bat around like when you make a cat angry and its tail starts doing that thing. Like, he was visibly, demonstrably angry with himself. Like, he knows this is the problem, and he just can't help himself from doing it. There are magnets in the ball and magnets in his gloves.
Yeah, I felt for him, right? Like, he walked out with the bat over his shoulder like an axe, determined running, sprinting from one end to the other for a couple of singles. A beautiful pull shot for 4 where he hit the ball well in front of square, sort of almost a wide mid-on by the time the ball hit the rope in front of the trumper stand. It just felt like all the pieces were aligned, only to, fish at one that he could have left. And again, this goes to what Bumrah does. He makes you do things that you otherwise wouldn't do.
Boland? Bumrah probably wasn't bowling to Coley.
No. Boland was bowling to Coley. You're absolutely right there. Boland is similar to Bumrah, though.
This is why we're professionals.
Boland does things to batters, playing in channels they don't necessarily need to because of the subtle movement. Got drawn into the shot, caught behind for 6, and he was devastated. I watched him all the way off the field. The last time he'll leave a test venue in Australia, in all probability, over 1,600 test runs in Australia, 700 is an average of 48. He's been an incredible competitor here across 4 or 5 series now. It isn't to be here at the final time. He does have that moment, his 30th 100 at Perth, which we'll never forget. It was a really special moment at the start of the series, but has failed to make a meaningful contribution since, and that's sad. I hope he has one final act in his test career. We don't know. Time will tell, but it's a shame that today ended the way that he would have been so desperate to have avoided, which was caught behind again.
And then Rishabh Pant. I mean, story of the last day in Melbourne for the shot that he played when they needed to bat out a draw, and then he came out today and he would have been under some pressure, under some criticism, and he took him on from the jump, hits his first ball down the ground for 6 from Boland. I mean, you could call it stupidity, you could call it nervelessness, you could call it whatever you wanted, but it was great to watch.
Looked absolutely mental for the first 5 minutes. Like, what on earth are you trying to do until you realise that this wasn't sort of like sugar high stuff. This wasn't dopamine hit stuff we were talking about last week. This was a clear plan. Low scoring game. If Punt gets away, it's a measured risk. But if it works,
he can break the game.
He can break the game open, precisely. He's 61 off 31 at the drinks break. He is careering towards a century in a session. Like, he bats for another 10 overs. He's almost certainly posting 3 figures. Yesterday, he made 40 from 98 balls. Today he reached his 40th run from his 18th ball. He ended up getting to 50 in 28, so he did slow down a tiny bit on the way to 50, I think it was, and then hit another 6 after that. 4 sixes for the 10th time in Test cricket, I think it was. Tom and our coverage had it. Some extraordinary stat again, only after Adam Gilchrist on that measure for hitting 4 or more sixes in an innings. And, it was the drinks break. Cliched as it is,
2 balls after.
Cummins sees the right time to reintroduce himself. It felt obvious that Cummins would come straight back on. Nathan Lyon was warming up, but Cummins is like, no, leave it to me. How often have we seen it over the years that when Cummins realises that a game is in the balance, he brings himself on and he immediately makes a contribution. Third ball there, Punt was trying to flame through the offside, hadn't reset again after drinks, caught behind, and that was the most influential moment of the day. Despite how brilliant Punt was to push them forward after losing that 4th wicket, after Shubman Gill fell to Bo Webster, his first wicket in Test cricket, which was an ugly dismissal, after it felt like we were on the cusp of something special, it's Cummins that cuts it all off.
It's Cummins who cuts it off, but I mean, we'll remember that bit it was when Punt was on 40, was it 48? He's coming up to the 50 and they bring Mitchell Starc back on and he just slots him clean over mid-wicket. that flick off the pads for
Shot.
6, and then backs it up. Next ball, wasn't it? Just hit the next one the same spot, or more behind square that one, but sends it sailing away. It was unbelievable batting, and I will make I'll make the distinction between, people say, oh well, you criticise the player when it comes off, when it doesn't come off, and praise them when they do. This was about the position in the game. The reason it was a dumb thing in Melbourne was because there was no benefit to hitting a 6. Here there were benefits, because Australia did get a bit shaken by it. They weren't sure what to do. They were at a loss for a while. Cummins was kind of shrugging and going, I don't know, we'll just keep bowling and hope he gets out, basically. And eventually that is what happened. But they're in a position now where they're 145 up. They've still got Jadeja there with the bowlers to come. So if they could get 60 out of them, if they could get 200 ahead from what we've seen on this surface, that could be a real handful, especially if Bumrah can get full of jabs, Brisbane Lions style, to make sure that he can come in and bowl a few overs tomorrow when India will be called upon.
Well, it made the Reddy dismissal 5 overs before stumps all the more painful, knowing that Reddy was the man with the hot hand. He's made it to 42 3 times in the series. 42 would have felt like 82 had he got there. But
42 is probably match winning from that.
It might well be, but
he clubs at the mid-off.
Well, it was a check drive, wasn't it? If he follows through with the shot, it's almost certainly clearing Cummins, but he checks the shot, and Cummins is just there on the edge of the fielding circle, so to speak, to give Boland his 4th. And they haven't even needed Nathan Lyon yet, and that'll be interesting tomorrow, because 2 left-handers in the middle, starting again. And then we know they've got a long tail. Bumrah, who hit runs the other day, granted, but still fundamentally not someone who you can depend on too much, especially when he might have shaggers back. We don't entirely know what's wrong with him. Haven't found out anything from the Indian campers yet. And Siraj is hit and miss as well. So a lot does rely on this partnership, like you say, putting on 50 or 60. But who would doubt it? It's been the series of twists and turns when you least expect it, as cliched as it is to keep repeating. But that has been true today, as it has been at almost any other point in this series.
A ridiculous day of Test cricket. A lot of fun. Enjoyed it a lot. Before we get to the Hall of Fame, what are we talking about?
Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, the number one plaintiff law firm in the country. 1919 is when they first started doing their thing. Maurice Blackburn, public intellectual, statesman, member of parliament, anti-conscription. Lots of other things you're going to learn about on the next story time. But fundamentally started Maurice Blackburn to make sure that there was a law firm who could look after workers, look after working people, and the same principles apply over 100 years later. So if you need legal support, workplace issues are their bread and butter. The link's in the show notes. Consider using Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, Australia's number one plaintiff law firm. We're going to take a beat. We'll be back in a moment with our Final Word Hall of Fame.
It is the Final Word Daily, the Australia-India Daily, getting into the Hall of Fame. I'll just say go and visit Victoria. Why not? Just do it. It's where we come from. It's a nice place. Some people do it.
I mean, the Indian players love going to Melbourne. They go to Chatty. They get a Chatty. They do their thing. I'm not saying necessarily that's the high point of culture in Australia necessarily. But you can go to a massive shopping centre with an even bigger car park.
It's got a smaller shopping centre inside it. That's how big it is.
Yeah, I always like, and then you know what?
You know who visits Victoria? Jack, who's watching us film this show, moved from Western Australia to Victoria. Didn't just visit, stayed. That's how good it is.
He did like Gary Buckenara did.
Everybody.
He moved from WA to Victoria and stayed.
Like Joel Corey.
You know? From WA to Victoria. Why don't you come to Victoria for next Ashes series next year? Why not come for the Women's Ashes? Starts on the 12th of January. There's time if you're good enough. Last minute plans are perfectly fine as well.
Hall of Fame, the most final word moments, the things that tickled us. The link I was going to make before between Bo Webster and Jasprit Bumrah. Jasprit Bumrah is the link through to Maurice Tate. Webster started off bowling some spin and then ended up bowling mediums and did all right. Maurice Tate started off bowling spin, bowled some mediums, did all right. Took 38 wickets in an Ashes series when England got panned, by the way, in 24-25, and he just bowled all the overs. But still, that's who Bumrah's trying to catch for the most wickets ever by a visiting bowler in an Australian tour. He needs 6 more. He probably won't get them now that his back's fucked, but it is very, very sad that he won't. But he got to 32 today, which means he went past Bishan Bedi's 31. So the most ever by an Indian bowler touring Australia. He's already got that in his skyrocket.
Yeah. As another West Australian who went there, Matthew Pavlich once said, put on those Superman capes, it's Wharfie time before the 2013 Grand Final. Maybe Bumrah will put on his Superman cape. Maybe tomorrow it will be Wharfie time for Jasprit Bumrah.
Maybe he will look at the photo of Hayden Ballantyne that he has pinned up on the visiting dressing room wall here at the SCG, and he will say, do it for Hayden.
My Hall of Fame's that Do You See What I See playing out when they announced the umpires this morning was quite funny from the Cricket Ground DJ. That will be my job one day.
Do you see what I see?
You do it, exactly. How about the Indian umbrellas? Bringing out the umbrellas for the drinks breaks to cover up the players to take shade when they were having their drinks today. Don't think I've seen it in the subcontinent when it's like
I haven't seen it
degrees.
under 30 degrees.
Yeah, it was an unusual
it was 29
thing.
today.
As Jared noted on our coverage, it was reminiscent of Jason Dunstall taking the Hawthorn players into the shade at three-quarter time at the Gabba in 1995, only for Brisbane and Andy Gowers actually to run over Hawthorn in the final term.
Yep.
After hiding in the shade.
I'm going to throw in a shame that the BCCI have missed out on a fundraising opportunity. I know they're a bit short of a quid sometimes. Just putting some sponsorship on the back of the training shirts, because the number of times that the shot was shown of Bumrah getting into the car, wasted space. Now, if they could, you know how they digitally project things onto the field? If they could digitally project a Pepsi or something onto Bumrah's back in that replay, they'd be making coin out of it.
Hologram technology has been a huge part of the series. Yeah. We've gone full quantum leap with Star, having the owl character next to Mark Nicholas on the ground each day, and anyone else who's doing work pitch side for Star. Yeah. So there's got to be some way of superimposing it on.
I like the bit where Mark Nicholas does a segment with Tupac, that really, and then he does the one with ABBA. That really works for me when they beam him in. Michael Geoff and his balloon, that was beautiful. The yellow balloon blew across the ground today, and Geoff at square leg grabbed it and then just held it for a while. And I thought he was just going to hold it to comfort himself, and I thought that's quite sweet. He can just hold the balloon for the rest of the session, and then he started trying to bite it because he wanted to pop it and he didn't have anything to pop it with. How do you not have a pen? If you're an umpire, you've got to have a pen. How do you not have one of those little SIM card tools in case one of the players is like, I've just got to use, do you have one of those things I can open up the iPhone
I keep my
with?
WhatsApp number, but I want to change my SIM card.
Apple, why did you invent a thing that, I know we've got eSIMs now and it doesn't matter, but we've got to make sure that you can't open this without an external implement. Anyway, why don't umpires have them? Eventually he did manage to bite it and exploded the balloon, and then looked very surprised that it made a loud noise and then rubbed his ears. Geoff didn't think this one through.
By the way, we've said before, if you have a chocolate milk company, you should sponsor the podcast. You've got an eSIM company, you should sponsor us as well, because we are the types of people who use those types of things.
Got about 17 of them currently sitting on my phone idling at the moment.
Bumrah, what I loved was our TV colleagues, including Slam and Sammy Jordan, basically chasing after him. And Sammy, he probably might if I tell this story. I'll tell a version of it. He was in the members bar, shall we say, and sprinted out with his phone to get the footage of Bumrah getting taken away with the escort, the ambulance escort, the whole way out when there was no cars out on Anzac Parade anyway. But there was Jasprit Bumrah getting the convoy to the hospital for his scan.
Yeah. Snapping pictures of someone with an escort is very commercial TV.
No, it was more about getting the footage for the news outlet, because there's no other way of getting it right. So great journalism there. And what else I got? Scott Boland's special shoes. I didn't know this. He's had shoes specially made for him. This got sent through today on our coverage with straps to protect his front toe. So basically, Scott Boland's got magic boots. Okay. Which is something to note next time that you're watching him bowl. And I think that's it. Our Hall of Fame is brought to you in conjunction also with the beautiful sunglasses I'm wearing here. T20 Vision. Get yourself a pair. These are the casual version that you can wear on the streets.
Yep. They inspired...
Not the sheets. You might be into that kind of thing, wearing sunnies in the sheets.
Well, it depends how brightly the sunlight is coming in through the windows, I suppose. If you want to get involved with the show, patreon.com/thefinalword. That's where all of our friends and neighbours are hanging out on the internet. We're there as well. Come and get involved. Why not? Help us do what we do. We'll have day 3 tomorrow. We might not have any more days beyond that. We
could be the final day of the series.
Could be.
Probably will be.
We'll hope to see you then.
Good night from Sydney.